Hi, I'm Alec Miller. I'm here at the Gfinity Arena, the UK's first dedicated esports arena, its first major event. I'm here with Raven and ThatsAdmirable. How are you guys feeling about the Gfinity Arena?
Yeah, I think it's really good. It's a big deal that it's even here, to be honest. I mean, having something like that in the UK and a company willing to invest in it and create such a great set of stages to host these pretty big tournaments, and the biggest the UK scene in terms of Hearthstone at least, is a really big deal.
It's certainly a lot more than I expected it to be. Initially, I kind of, I've been to a lot of events, and some of them are kind of like, they have stages and stuff like that. But here it was like, you started to get a really good sense of what their plan is for the rest of the year when you saw the scale and the approach and sort of what their vision was. And that, to me, is really the most exciting point, because I think esports needs more of that.
Cool. So we've been seeing a nice mix of local, new caster talent, as well as like the more famous. That's admirable. How are you guys finding the mixing of all the different casters at today's event?
Personally, for me, I think it's been great because, we've got casters like Admirable, Nimsh, and I've been able to learn a lot. My background's more online tournaments, so actually live cast in front of a crowd with a lot more things to manage is definitely been a learning experience. I think I've actually improved as I went along, but with help from Admirable and Nimsh, give me a lot of pointers. It's been great for me, probably a hindrance to you, maybe.
No, not at all, actually. I mean, just as long as the games are good, that's really the most important part. Having fluid structure and everything run smoothly is really the most important part. And of course, good equipment really helps that. And so we've been fortunate enough to have great equipment here. And it just worked out really smoothly and really nicely, and there needs to be more casters in Hearthstone, frankly, just coming from that area specifically. There just aren't enough of them right now.
Yeah, so obviously it's the first major event here. There have been a few technical glitches, and sadly we've had disconnects at critical moments during the tournament. Just didn't need to happen just then and there. Could happen at any other point, would have been all right. How have you guys felt that's affected the tournament?
Well, disconnects are part of the game. It's just really, there's not much you can do with it. The most important thing, though, is to follow through on the first decision you make. Consistency is super key when it comes to that. So, really early on in a game, maybe turn 1 or turn 2, it makes a lot of sense to remake it. But when you start getting into the later stages of the games, it makes a lot more sense to actually kind of award one way or the other. Just for the sake that the opinions are so skewed that you really have to have an unbiased party kind of evaluate the state of the game and see what they think about it. Now, when it comes to that, it would be great to have a professional in that position who's sort of designing that rule set. And I don't know if they had that here. I don't know really who came up with the rules or why the rules are the rules the way they are. But, the rules are the rules and everyone has to follow them.
So,
I was just going to say, completely agree. I think that regardless, these things pop up and there's certain things that you can't really, organisers maybe don't foresee happening, and they do happen. But I think just once the decision's made on it once, it needs to be followed through, definitely. I mean, you set precedent, so you just have to carry on. The second you start flipping decisions each time is everything goes to chaos. So, just completely agree.
Yeah.
So, what about in terms of new meta that we've seen coming out the decks at this tournament? I mean, obviously, Unstable Portal into Miron's head to get that super value was just ridiculous. But have we seen some interesting changes in the Hearthstone meta this tournament?
That's sort of just what happens with Hearthstone in general, especially when you have a new format introduced. And Conquest has a much different dynamic to it than last year's Standing did, where you were typically just wanted to play decks that had very strong win rates against what you expected to be the most popular decks. Now it's important to actually construct a lineup that functions in total against what you expect to face. And that's where a lot of the deck building strategy comes in. And sometimes people will play decks that frankly are not one of the best decks, specifically for the purpose that it helps fill up a weak spot in their lineup so that they don't get 3-0'd by certain different kinds of lineups.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting as well is in maybe not meta in terms of deck building, but again lineups, is that the first game in the Conquest is really strange because it is blind pick, like it's almost certainly always going to be. But the idea that your first game isn't maybe as big, well, anywhere near as big a deal as it was in Last Hero Standing, because the problem with Last Hero Standing is you gain the ability to sort of push into counters, whereas in this format, your first game can lose, but that means you have a bit more options to come from. You've got 3 decks to pick from against your opponent's only 2, so it narrows it down quite a lot. So it's been really interesting to see how each player approaches that.
Cool. So, Admirable, I'd like to ask you what kind of casting techniques you employ, and then Raven, maybe you could tell us what you've learned from this tournament.
I just kind of talk about what I see and go from there. I mean, I actually get pretty excited about Hearthstone. It's just one of those things for me. And verbalization has not really been a problem for me. And sometimes I make up words like George Bush does, but it all works out in the end. I end up getting excited about stuff, and that's really where I feel like most of my I don't know, personality stems from, I guess, is just my general excitement for the game and how much I love Hearthstone.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's a lot of it's been based on being able to cast with people I've not really cast before. I mean, I've not actually been casting with Caldi this weekend, but I have cast with him, and obviously I've cast with Aquablad. But a lot of it's come from the technical side of it, if I'm honest, just working with equipment I've not really worked with before, and then literally in front of a big crowd that you're in full view of, where I've done other live tournaments where the casts are normally put to one side. But yeah, I think it's just it's been a good experience overall.
So obviously got Blackrock Mountain coming up soon, guys. Any cards that are particularly going to change the meta, or like interesting new techniques you're excited about that's going to come out of that expansion?
All right, so this is my conspiracy theory with Blackrock Mountain.
Oh, this is on like
yeah, okay, so
right.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be right, but this is really what I think. Cost is certainly an issue that Blizzard has with Hearthstone. For new players getting into the game, it costs a lot of money, and I'm assuming at some point in the future they're going to have a plan to help fix that. So I think sort of to allude to that, or maybe just kind of throw people a bone and alleviate that situation, sort of how you got 5 different legendaries in the Naxxramas, I think you'll get something very, very similar to that in Blackrock Mountain. But it would only make sense to me to see something like a Ragnaros reprint or some sort of reprint in there to kind of like, hey, this is the exact same card, but we know that you can't always afford 1600 dust, so if you can manage to get here through the gold, here you go, here's your reprint. And it's basically just an alternate art version.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting actually, because that's something a lot of other card games do. Obviously, normally actual card-based games, but yeah, I think that'd be a really good idea actually. But it's in terms of actual cards, I think the dragon mechanic's going to be really interesting. We've seen Mech come into play through GVG, and everyone loves dragons, so that'd be great. I'm interested to see how they've decided with the new mechanic of if you hold a dragon in your hand, this creature does this extra or this more, because I don't know how. If people play full dragon decks, and if that's possible, fine. But otherwise, you giving your opponent information that if you play a card, it's like, oh, okay, so he has one of X amount of dragons. Because I imagine in most expansions, you don't play with all the cards competitively because they're not all at one time anyway competitive. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how that mechanic works out.
Any final shout-outs or final thoughts you guys want to add?
You can just find me on social media. It's @ThatsAdmirable on pretty much everything: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch.
Yeah, and for me, you'll find me at Raven Inf, which is Raven INF. I play for Team Infused, along with Aquablad, who's also casting here, and Sottle, who's currently playing. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great, excellent. Thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me, guys.
My pleasure.
No problem.
Thank you.